Welcome, everyone. Today, we're beginning a journey into cloud computing, one of the most transformative technologies reshaping modern IT. Over the next several slides, we'll explore what cloud computing really is, where it came from, and how it's evolved from an internal corporate concept into the global on-demand platforms that power businesses today. Whether you're an IT professional starting your cloud journey, a developer looking to build on Azure, or an administrator managing infrastructure, this session is designed to give you a solid foundation. By the end, you'll understand the key concepts behind cloud computing, the different types of cloud environments, the service models available to you, and how Microsoft Azure fits into this picture. Let's get started. So why is cloud computing such a big deal? Cloud adoption has exploded. Practically every enterprise today uses some form of cloud services, whether for storage, computing power, or software delivery. In fact, analysts consistently show that over 90% of enterprises have adopted cloud in some form. The modern public cloud era really began in 2006 when Amazon Web Services launched their Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2. This gave businesses access to on-demand virtual servers for the first time in a pay-as-you-go model. Microsoft Azure, which we'll focus on throughout this course, uses a per-minute billing system. This is important. It means you pay for exactly what you use, calculated to the minute. If your virtual machine runs for 12 days, 11 hours, and 13 minutes, you pay for precisely that amount. This level of cost precision was simply not possible with traditional IT. Many organizations start their cloud journey and quickly realize that cloud administration requires a different mindset than on-premises management. Instead of buying servers and waiting weeks for hardware, you can provision resources in minutes. Instead of over-provisioning just in case, you scale exactly to demand. Cloud skills are incredibly valuable right now. And that's exactly why we're here today. Cloud computing didn't appear overnight. Its roots go back further than most people realize. In the 1960s, computer scientists explored the idea of time sharing, where multiple users could share a single powerful mainframe computer. This idea of shared, on-demand computing is conceptually the same foundation cloud is built on today. Fast forward to the 1990s. Companies started building internal virtualization platforms, allowing their employees to create virtual machines on demand. This is what we now call the private cloud. At this point, the term cloud wasn't even widely used, but the concept was taking shape. The real turning point came in 2006. Amazon Web Services launched EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud, and for the first time, businesses could rent virtual servers by the hour from a public provider. This was revolutionary. 2 years later, in 2008, Google launched App Engine, bringing another major player into the space. Microsoft was close behind. They announced their cloud platform in October 2008, and Microsoft Azure was publicly available by February 2010. Since then, the cloud market has grown dramatically. Today, while many companies offer cloud services, including IBM and Oracle, two providers dominate the market by a significant margin: Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. That's why we're focusing on Azure in this course. Cloud computing is built on two foundational pillars. Neither one alone is sufficient, but together they create the cloud as we know it. The first pillar is virtualization. Server virtualization allows you to run multiple virtual machines on a single physical server. Instead of needing one physical server per application or service, you can consolidate many workloads onto fewer physical machines. This saves cost, space, power, and cooling. But virtualization by itself is just a tool. What makes it cloud is the second pillar. The second pillar is on-demand resources. This means you can get computing resources exactly when you need them, without waiting days or weeks for hardware procurement. You request a virtual machine, and within minutes, sometimes seconds, it exists and is ready to use. Originally, this started internally within companies. IT departments would create virtualization platforms and allow developers to spin up their own test environments from pre-configured images. No more submitting tickets and waiting for weeks. Today, cloud has taken both of these concepts to an entirely new level. We're not just talking about VMs in your own data center. We're talking about hundreds of different services deployed globally, scaled automatically, and built precisely. There are 4 types of cloud computing that you'll encounter in your career. Different organizations use different combinations depending on their needs, regulations, and budgets. Private cloud. This is where it all started. Everything runs inside your own data center. You own the hardware, you manage the software, and no internet connection is needed to access resources. You have maximum control, but also maximum responsibility and cost. Building a proper private cloud requires significant investment in hardware, software licenses, cooling, power, networking, and skilled personnel. Hosted cloud. Think of this as a step between private and public. A specialized service provider creates a dedicated, isolated environment in their data center just for you. You're essentially renting a private cloud. It's cheaper than building your own, and you typically access it via a VPN. The provider handles the hardware and basic maintenance. Public cloud. This is what Microsoft Azure is. Resources are available to anyone over the internet. Multiple customers share the same underlying infrastructure, but through multi-tenancy and isolation technology, your data and resources remain completely separate from others. The key advantages are near unlimited scale and pay-per-use pricing. Hybrid cloud. This is the most common real-world scenario. Organizations keep some workloads on-premises, perhaps for regulatory reasons or because they've already invested in that infrastructure, while moving others to the public cloud. These environments are connected through VPNs or dedicated connections. The hybrid model allows a gradual, controlled migration to the cloud. Most organizations you'll work with will be in some form of hybrid cloud. Understanding all 4 types is essential. Let's take a closer look at the private cloud, because understanding its limitations is what helps us appreciate what the public cloud actually solves. The private cloud means everything is on premises, in your own data center, fully under your control. This sounds appealing, and for some organizations it's the right choice, particularly when regulatory or compliance requirements demand full data sovereignty. But the investment required is substantial. Let me walk you through what you actually need. Physical space, you need a data center. This means square footage, raised flooring, cable management, and physical security. Power and cooling. Data centers generate enormous heat. You need redundant power supplies, UPS systems for battery backup, and sophisticated air conditioning units. A single power or cooling failure can take down your entire environment. Networking hardware, firewalls, routers, core switches, edge switches, load balancers. Each of these is a significant cost, and you need redundancy at every level. Servers and storage. Physical servers, storage arrays, backup infrastructure. Hardware ages and needs to be replaced typically every 3 to 5 years. Software licenses, your virtualization platform, operating system licenses for every VM, management, and monitoring tools. These costs add up quickly, and they recur. And finally, skilled personnel. This is often the most underestimated cost. You don't just need one generalist. You need specialized experts in networking, storage, virtualization, and security. And you need them for every shift. When you add all of this up, it becomes clear why many organizations are moving to the cloud. The public cloud essentially lets someone else handle most of these layers. The hosted cloud was an important stepping stone between the private cloud and the public cloud we have today. Let's compare these 2 types side by side so you can clearly see the differences. Resources. In a hosted cloud, you negotiate a contract and receive a fixed allocation of resources, a certain number of CPU cores, a certain amount of RAM and storage. If you need more, you have to request it, and the provider may or may not be able to accommodate you quickly. In the public cloud, the provider maintains a massive shared pool, and you can consume as much as you need, essentially instantly. Access. The hosted cloud typically requires a VPN connection, either site-to-site for permanent connectivity between your office and the provider, or point-to-site for individual user access. The public cloud is accessed over the standard internet, which is far simpler to set up and manage. Pricing. The hosted cloud uses a subscription model. You pay a fixed monthly or yearly fee regardless of how much you actually use. Even if your systems are idle 80% of the time, you pay the same amount. The public cloud charges you only for what you actually consume, calculated per minute in Azure's case. Scalability. If you hit the limits of your hosted environment, you're stuck waiting for the provider to procure and configure more hardware. In the public cloud, you click a button and your environment scales. The hosted cloud was, and still is, a valuable option for organizations that need dedicated, isolated infrastructure but don't want the full burden of private cloud ownership. But for most modern use cases, the public cloud offers better economics and far greater flexibility. Let's now clearly define the 5 key concepts that characterize the public cloud. These are the core principles you need to internalize. Number 1, access over the internet. Unlike private and hosted clouds that require VPNs, the public cloud is accessible from anywhere with an internet connection. This sounds simple, but it fundamentally changes how organizations operate. Remote work, global teams, and mobile access become trivially easy. Number 2, multi-tenancy. This is one of the most important and most misunderstood concepts. When you use Azure, you're sharing the same physical hardware as other Azure customers. This might sound concerning, but through sophisticated isolation technology, your tenant, your subscription, is completely separated from everyone else's. Think of it like an apartment building. Many people share the same structure, but each unit is private and secure. Number 3, resource pooling. The provider maintains enormous shared pools of compute, memory, storage, and networking. These resources are dynamically allocated to customers based on demand. No single customer owns a physical server. They consume logical resources from a pool. Number 4, on-demand consumption. You consume what you need when you need it. Create a database server at 9 a.m. for a project. Delete it at 5 p.m. when you're done. You pay only for those 8 hours. Number 5, highly scalable. This is perhaps the most powerful feature. If your virtual machine can't handle its workload, you don't need to rebuild it. You scale it up. Change from 4 CPUs and 16 gigabytes RAM to 16 CPUs and 64 gigabytes RAM in minutes. And equally, scale back down when the demand drops, so you're not paying for resources you don't need. One of the most important practical aspects of Microsoft Azure is how it bills you. Let's look at a concrete example. Imagine you create a virtual machine in Azure and then delete it after 12 days, 11 hours, and 13 minutes. In a per-day billing system, you'd pay for 13 full days. That's almost a full day of extra charges you didn't actually use. In a per-hour billing system, which many earlier cloud services used, you'd pay for 12 days and 12 hours, rounding up to the next complete hour. Better, but you're still paying for time you didn't consume. Azure uses per-minute billing. You pay for exactly 12 days, 11 hours, and 13 minutes. No rounding, no waste. This precision matters enormously when you're running hundreds or thousands of resources. For large organizations, the difference between per hour and per minute billing can amount to significant savings, especially for short-lived workloads like batch processing jobs, development environments that get spun up for a few hours, or automated testing pipelines. Before I move on, I want to briefly mention multi-tenancy and subscriptions. When you sign up for Azure, you create a subscription. That subscription defines your Azure tenant. Through Azure's underlying fabric technology, your tenant is completely isolated from every other customer's tenant. Even though you're sharing physical hardware, your data, your virtual machines, your networks, none of that is accessible to other customers. This isolation is fundamental to cloud security. The hybrid cloud is, in practice, the most common cloud configuration you'll encounter as an IT professional. Rather than being an all-or-nothing decision, most organizations take a gradual, pragmatic approach. On one side, you have your on-premises data center. This might contain legacy applications that are difficult or expensive to migrate, highly sensitive data subject to strict regulations, core databases, and internal tools. On the other side, you have Microsoft Azure. Organizations typically move workloads here that benefit most from cloud characteristics. web applications that need to scale, development and test environments, big data analytics workloads, disaster recovery solutions, and burst capacity for peak demand. The critical element connecting these two environments is typically either a VPN or Azure ExpressRoute. A VPN provides an encrypted connection over the public internet. ExpressRoute is a dedicated, private connection directly to Microsoft's network, offering better performance and reliability for mission-critical workloads. From a practical standpoint, hybrid cloud requires that both environments behave consistently. That means consistent identity and access management, consistent networking policies, and ideally consistent tooling. Microsoft has invested heavily in this with services like Azure Arc, which extends Azure management capabilities to your on-premises infrastructure. When you join an organization as an Azure administrator, you will almost certainly be working in a hybrid environment. Understanding how on-premises and cloud environments connect, communicate, and coexist is fundamental to your role. Today, the public cloud market is dominated by two players, and the gap between them and everyone else is significant. Amazon Web Services was first. They launched EC2 in 2006 and have been a market leader ever since. AWS has the broadest service catalog, the largest global footprint, and a massive community of users and documentation. If you've worked in any startup or technology company in the last decade, you've almost certainly encountered AWS. Microsoft Azure came second, publicly launching in February 2010. While AWS leads in total market share, Azure has grown rapidly, particularly in enterprise environments. Why? Because most large organizations already depend on Microsoft products. Windows Server, Active Directory, Office 365, SQL Server, Visual Studio. Azure integrates seamlessly with all of these. If your organization uses Active Directory for identity management, Azure AD extends that directly to the cloud. If you use SQL Server, Azure SQL Database is a managed version with near-identical compatibility. If your developers use Visual Studio, Azure DevOps integrates naturally. This is why we're focusing on Azure in this course. For most enterprise IT professionals, Azure is the most relevant and immediately applicable cloud platform. Other providers, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud, Oracle Cloud, are all legitimate platforms with specific strengths. But from a market share and enterprise adoption perspective, AWS and Azure are in a category of their own. Let's bring it all together with 6 key takeaways from this session. 1. Cloud computing rests on two foundations: virtualization, which allows multiple virtual machines on a single physical server, and on-demand resources, which means getting computing power exactly when you need it. 2. There are 4 types of cloud: private, hosted, public, and hybrid. Each has its place, and understanding the differences will help you advise organizations on the right architecture. 3. The public cloud is defined by 5 characteristics: internet access, multi-tenancy with isolation, resource pooling, on-demand consumption, and high scalability. Commit these to memory. 4. Azure uses per minute billing. This is more precise than per hour billing. It means you pay for exactly the time you use, nothing more. 5. Hybrid cloud is the most common configuration in practice. Most enterprises don't do a full migration overnight. They connect their existing on-premises systems to Azure and gradually move workloads. 6. AWS and Microsoft Azure are the dominant players. As an IT professional focused on enterprise environments, Azure is your primary focus. And that's exactly what this course is designed to help you master. In our next session, we'll go deeper into Azure's architecture, subscriptions, resource groups, regions, and availability zones. This will give you the mental model you need to start deploying and managing resources confidently. Thank you for your attention. Any questions before we move on?